So my name's Dave Price and welcome to the True Business Show. And today's guest is Tony Houlihan from Aligned Property. So Tony, welcome on board.
Hey Dave, thanks very much for having me on this morning. Appreciate it.
Really good to see you on here. Yeah, I'm really looking to find out more about what you do on the property side, because my background's on the property as well. So yeah, really excited to hear more about what you guys do. But the first question we always start these shows with now is, how do you help people, Tony?
So we help people in property in a number of different ways. We've got a few strings to our bow, if you will, predominantly from being investors and developers ourselves. We found a bit of a niche where we sort of offer consultancy services. So this could be people looking to acquire investments. It could be people looking to step into property development. It could be people that are looking for extra support because they're changing the types of developments and investments they're doing or the type of area. So we try and keep it fairly simple in terms of our offering. It's not too complicated, but we can do everything from finding professional teams, contractors, all the way to finding, a buy-to-let in Stockport, if that's what people really want.
Oh, right. So it's a complete range. When you say property, it's not just buy-to-lets or development, it's the whole shebang.
Yeah, so I think my background is I've done a bit of everything. So I've done some new build, I've done some conversions, done some service accommodation, done some supported living at the minute. So I've got a little bit of experience in everything. And we tend to find that people in property tend to try and move around the different so-called strategies. They try and, move up to big developments at some point and that sort of stuff. So it's helping people at different stages of their property sort of journey. That's not too crude a way of explaining it.
Yep, no, that makes total sense. I mean, that's the thing with property, because it is big figures. You can make a mistake and it can really cost a new investor heavily.
So having been on both sides of that coin, I've been an investor in other people's developments. I've been a developer, using investors' money, using private finance, using bank finance. One of the things that we've picked up a lot of work from this year is helping people not make those mistakes at the beginning of a big development and making sure the structure's right and they've got the right professional team around them. That's not just architects and quantity surveyors, that's advisors. It could be people doing the surveys for them. It's filling in the gaps in their team or their knowledge to help them make sure their development succeed.
Right. Yep, that makes total sense. So you said you've done some investment yourself. How did you get into this in the first place, and why?
So I actually did my first buy to let in 2013, so 10 years ago. Didn't know very much about property back then. I think I'd only just bought my own residence, been in rented for quite a long time. And my dad and my brother had started doing a little bit of handyman stuff. They were working for a couple of other local developers. They were putting in kitchens, bathrooms, that sort of thing on a day rate. But, they cottoned on to what the guys that they were working for were doing. They were basically buying rundown houses, turning them into rental properties and just keeping them. And all the guys that they were working for were driving around these fancy cars and had 100 houses, 200 houses. And we just over a family meal, family event. I can't remember the exact occasion. We said, well, we could all chip in a little bit of money and buy a house together, see what happens. We could do the same thing, and it sort of started from there. I still had a corporate job. It was a little bit of fun on the side. It wasn't anything that I ever thought would happen in terms of a career.
Right.
But it sort of evolved from there. I sort of just got the bug, and then over the years, I've done a little bit of everything, as I just said, and it escalated quite quickly about 5 years ago.
Oh, was a key reason or a key turning point 5 years ago that?
Yeah, so I had a change in sort of circumstances with my career. I ended up working for a guy that I didn't particularly get on with all of a sudden after having, some great bosses over the course of my career. And he wanted me to work away quite a lot. I got two young kids, and it wasn't for me traveling all the time. So I decided that I was going to try and take a bit of my time back and find something else to do. So I was going to do a bit more property, and the theory of that was that would give me some time freedom back.
Yep. So that was actually when you actually stopped the proper day job and went into the property.
Yeah, so I started, and I went probably all guns blazing, probably a little bit too quick in hindsight.
Mm.
I went from having a very good job, a very steady income, to all of a sudden needing certain projects to come in on time and happen on time. And anyone that's been in and around property for a bit knows that, nothing ever happens on time for a start.
Very true.
Everything
Yep.
takes a bit longer. Everything costs more money than it should.
Yep.
And you never know what's around the next corner. So I think in hindsight, I probably jumped a little bit too soon because I was excited about what we were doing, had some great projects, but nothing could predict what was going to happen. It was COVID.
Of course. Yes. I mean, how did you actually find that jump? Because to go from a full-time job, good salary, everybody's dream to go to move away, to get out of the rat race and set up on your own. But when I did that myself, I found that huge that for, first of all, for going the regular salary, and then suddenly I was in charge of the marketing and the accounts, and everything comes down to you. How did you find that at the time?
I found the move into sort of looking after all the different departments, if you want to call it that, so the finance, the marketing, and stuff. I actually really enjoyed that bit of it. I come from a quite niche career in procurement, so I buy goods and services. That's sort of my career. That's the vocation that I've done for 20 odd years. So I'm negotiating, I'm dealing with people. Quite a lot of that stuff I carry on doing in property. That's not different.
Yep.
It's solving problems, it's doing deals, it's finding new opportunities, whether they be houses or suppliers. It's pretty much the same thing. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed picking up the accounting side of it. I enjoyed picking up the marketing side of it. The problem is that you're learning all that at the same time as learning how to be a property developer or run a construction business. And then you've got to
Mm.
deal with all the health and safety implications and the accounting returns and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think anyone actually prepares you for that. They just say, well, this is how you go and build two houses, or this is how you go and build a property portfolio. There's not many people around that teach you, well, actually, if you're going to start a development business, you need to do that with your financial structure, and you need to do that with your partnership agreements and, your suppliers and your contractors. There's so much to every different part of property. For someone to be able to train you to do it properly, you'd never actually start. You're too busy learning all the different things. So I found that a little bit enjoyable in terms of variety, but there's a lot to take in. And as you quite rightly said at the beginning, you don't get paid for it quite a lot of the time. If you're doing development, some of the schemes I've worked on, they've been 3 to 4 years from start to finish. That's a long time to wait to get paid if you don't have a lot of cash in the bank sitting there.
It is indeed. Yes, great payday when it happens, but to get through that 3 or 4 years first is a huge challenge, I would imagine.
It's one of the things that one of the guys I spend a lot of time with always says, well, if you actually split that money down, that looks great in the bottom right hand corner of the spreadsheet over the duration of the project and work out how much time you're spending on that project in a week. And you soon get back to some sort of hourly rate or daily rate. And you'd be surprised how many times you go, well, actually, is it worth all that?
Yeah, the amount of time to take it to put into a project that's going to take that long to fruition. But presumably that's why you'd have long-term ones as well as short-term stuff going on at the same time.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I'm doing at the minute, to be honest, is shorter term projects. There's uncertainty in the market. Money's expensive, whether it be bank finance or private finance. So deals have got to be really good, really, really easy to exit for me to be doing anything at the minute.
Yeah.
So I'm
And
looking
how
at
are you?
building high value houses that take 2 to 3 years because we don't know where the end of the market's going to be in 2 to 3 years. It's much easier to predict something like a supported housing project. You can buy a house, do it up, have it leased out within 6 months. So, and you know exactly what the provider's going to pay. So that for me is a much safer strategy at the minute.
So when you say supported housing project, because some people won't actually know exactly what you mean by that, can you just expand on it for us?
Yeah, no problem. So at the moment, I'm doing a couple of projects with a supported housing provider, and this sector's gone quite popular in the last couple of years because it is generally a higher yielding strategy. So basically, a care provider will have tenants with specific needs that will come in from either the council or a care organisation, so sort of alcohol, drugs misuse, might just be general homelessness, it might be asylum seekers. They'll have a list of people that they need to put in housing, in accommodation. They will try and find a landlord to partner with to look after those people. Um, and as part of that, they will give the landlord a long-term lease. So they'll give them a long-term commitment. So you don't have to deal with your tenants changing every year. You don't have to deal with tenants moving in and out, damaging your property, because the care organisation normally picks that up as part of their lease. So it's quite attractive and being sold everywhere as a hands-off strategy. I'd emphasise that I don't think anything in property is hands-off. I think, you need to be very aware of whatever you do in property, it is very rarely hands off. I've got some investments and some projects that have gone very well, that have been quite pain free. But there's definitely lessons in every project and investment that you do.
Absolutely. Yes. So working with care providers like that, then, so they take like a 5-year lease on it, and they do all the management side of it.
Yeah, so they'll look after people coming in and out. They will go around and deliver the care that's needed. So some of it is literally they'll turn up for an hour, just check everyone's okay. Other ranges of that level of care is, some of them will actually have people living on site. All depends on the building, the different provider, and the different sort of tenants' needs.
Right. And at the end of the lease, then I'm automatically thinking, oh, is that quite high on wear and tear and damage, potential damage to a property?
They look after it for the duration of the lease, so it's on a fixed and repairing lease. But at the end of it, obviously, you've got an agreement with the provider for them to put things right, etc. It doesn't mean that you don't have to go and visit the property for 5 years. I'd still advocate going getting it checked.
Yeah.
But in the majority, it should sit on the care provider, but it's down to each provider's lease and each landlord getting the right advice.
Right. Got ya. Yeah, because I mean, it sounds great from an investor's perspective, not having to deal with individual tenants, etc. I mean, are there other downsides to it as well, or is it?
Sometimes it's not as profitable as private rental. So at the minute, obviously in the country, there's a massive shortage of rental properties. The rental rates for private have gone through the roof, whereas the local housing authority allowance has stayed fairly static. It is due to go up in April next year. They're announcing that in January. They've not said to anyone how much it is yet, but it's definitely not going to catch up with private. So what you'll tend to find is the supported housing only works in the lower end areas. So it won't work in South Manchester where I am. It won't work up in York where you are because the housing is just too expensive. So to do, traditional buy to let up there is difficult. But to put it on sort of LHA rates it doesn't make sense. It doesn't stack up. But somewhere like East Lancashire, Accrington, Rossendale, those sorts of places where the housing is very cheap, it makes it quite a lucrative investment.
Got ya. Yeah, it makes sense. Just depending on the area and the values involved. Yeah. Cool. So I was going to say, is that the most popular thing you're being involved in at the moment?
In terms of what's taking up my time, is that your question?
Yeah, yeah. It seems to be that in property, every few years there's a new shiny. Everybody's doing that. I
I'd,
just
def-
wondered.
I'd definitely say that's supported at the moment.
Hmm,
I'd prefer, given everything that I've done in property so far, I'd prefer to do new build. Because I feel like that's the bit I enjoy the most. I enjoy seeing the field turn into new homes.
hmm.
I like the fact that it's you do have an exit, so you do have you creating something and then you're delivering a new home and you're passing it over to someone that wants it. I do like that element of it. I think it's easier from a management perspective in terms of construction and oversight as a developer. Feel like conversions and stuff, there's more that can go wrong. There's more unforeseen problems.
Yeah.
So if I could pick, I'd do new build all day, every day. But I think at the market, the conditions as an SME developer don't really work for that, which is why I've pivoted into sort of social and supported for the time being.
Mm. But basically, though, what you're doing is actually changing just as the market changes. So potentially things improve in the future, go back into the new builds a little bit more and keeping that flexibility and just changing with the climate.
You need to be adaptable in property. Lots of people back out of the market at certain points. I don't advocate that. I just advocate just being able to change strategy, being agile, knowing that there is other ways to make money. There might be, you might have the same property in a certain place. It might not work at the minute as a buy to let, but it might work for supported, it might work for service accommodation. Knowing all the different models and different ways you can use a property will help you when you need to diversify and whether you need to change your tactics.
Yeah, and that's the whenever someone changes tactics and tries something new, anything you do new for the first time, you're always going to make more mistakes on, I find, as well.
100%. So that's another thing about moving around from strategy to strategy or doing different projects in different places. You do tend to pick up your fair share of mistakes when you're doing that. Whereas I know some guys that just do HMOs, supported housing all day long, every day, and they get very, very good at it. But if some reason their number one client goes bankrupt or the market changes or all of a sudden the finance products aren't available, then you've got all your eggs in one basket. So it's a difficult thing to move from.
Absolutely. No, I think that flexibility and changing with the market makes total sense. So I was just wondering, so is there a sort of standard client you work with? Have you got an average client or is it a complete?
I'll give you a few examples. So the people we've worked with this year on the consultancy side of the business. So we've worked with a developer up in Morecambe who was going from single buy-to-lets. He'd done hundreds of buy-to-lets, but he was going up into conversions. So he was doing, all of a sudden, he was doing 7 apartments, he was doing 5 apartments. The complexity gets a little bit different. So he needed someone that had a bit more knowledge, wasn't just able to throw the keys to the builder and say, see you in a few months anymore. So we looked at, bringing in QS, project managers, looking at making sure that they were compliant with building regs, those sort of things. Because they were things that, although he had loads of experience in property, he'd never done before. So we've worked with people like that. I'm currently working with 2 teachers, which is a really exciting project up in the northwest. Tends to be where all our stuff is. That's 6 new build houses. These guys never done a property project in their lives. They've bought
And they've gone straight to do 6 new builds.
Yeah, they've bought this beautiful farmhouse up in the countryside, but it's not too far away from Eden. They've got planning this site, and they spent 4 years and lots of money and time and stress invested in getting the planning for this. And they've got this vision for this site that they wanted to do this development, but they've come to contact the finance broker to try and raise funding for it. And the first thing the funders said to him, "Well, who's on your team?" And they were like, "Well, what team do we need? We just need the money and a builder." And the broker quite rightly picked up the phone and said, "Tony, I think I might have someone that might do with a little bit of help here." So we've gone from, having an initial chat with them to appointing tax advisors, appointing the right accountants, to getting a QS and a project manager on board, making sure they're getting all the right surveys done. We've picked a lender via the broker that works with first-time developers. So we're literally building a team from scratch for them. but making sure that they've got all the right professionals around them to deliver the job properly and safely without risking, what they've already spent so long building up.
Yeah. Because that totally makes sense to me why somebody like that with no experience would come to you. But the other guy that you mentioned who's done hundreds of buy-to-lets, I would have just thought, do you find sometimes people are, well, I mean, property, I've done hundreds of buy-to-let, I know about property, even though they're going into a different field where they haven't actually got experience. Is that a bit of a challenge? People think they know it all, or?
I think there's two things here. Yeah, I'm sure you won't mention him, Simon. Simon's got 3, 4 various very successful businesses, and for him it was more of a capacity issue than a capability thing. He definitely could have stepped up into conversions, but he would have had to take his foot off the gas off some of his other business interests, which he didn't want to do. So it was safe pair of hands to go and look after that part of it, but without committing to a fixed resource, without bringing in permanent members of staff, because they were short-term projects. The other element of it, people do jump in and go, well, yeah, I've done a buy to let. How can a HMO be? Well, actually, there's quite a lot of regulations changes. There's quite a lot of stuff that happens all the time in terms of construction regulations, building regs. It's changing all the time. You need to have a team on board that are up to speed with that. And that's not my strong point. I'm not a technical person. I'm commercially driven. So I'm looking at deals. I like finding the opportunities. I like appointing the builder and then handing it over and coming and, monitoring it as things go along, dealing with any problems, sure. But I don't want to be on site every day checking whether the plumber's turned up. That's not where I enjoy what I'm doing. But, being able to appoint that project manager that can do that and know that your property project's still going to be going along in the background is, peace of mind for the guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I find with property, because most people live in houses, people automatically think they all know about property, even just buying a single buy to you find this as well.
Everyone's got an opinion because they know property. They're in and out of it all day. Actually, most people have been a tenant.
Yeah.
Most people have been a homeowner, and they've all got an opinion. Some of them are misfounded. Some of them are guided by the media, especially in terms of landlord reputation and things like that. But we won't go into that today. Um, it is difficult at the moment being a property professional, whether you're an investor or a developer. It's tough out there. The market conditions are tough. And you don't get a lot of thanks for it a lot of the time.
No, very, very true. Is there a sort of like the classic mistakes you see newer investors constantly making before they come to talk to you?
I think a lot of the things we're dealing with at the minute is people overspending at the beginning. So they will go to the first tax advisor they meet, they will go to the first mortgage broker they meet, that they get recommended to. Sometimes committing to costs that they wouldn't need to pay for. Sometimes, going with the wrong broker because, brokers obviously look after different lenders and they've all got different priorities in terms of specialities and the type of lenders they deal with. There's a massive variance going through the market from a big player to a small player, what deals they can get and things like that. And we tend to find a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at, I get asked, "Oh, I've got X% on this deal, and it's 5 years. Is that a good deal?" And I was like, "Well, it's too difficult to say that straight away, because every person's unique. They've all got different financial circumstances. You might have been to the wrong broker for that." We had a problem refinancing a couple of properties once that we built, and we literally went to the broker that we used on all our other stuff, and he'd been okay up to that point. But for that type of remortgage, we needed a commercial broker, really. And
Yeah.
it's not until you've been around the block a few times in property you understand that's the broker that you'd use for that type of project. Whereas if I was going doing an industrial development, I'd be using someone completely different.
Yeah,
And
it's choosing the right people in the team depending on what the project actually is.
absolutely. I know people that I've been with the same architect for 20 years is brilliant, but if he's never done an HMO in Scunthorpe, he's probably not the right person to use.
Absolutely. It's an interesting, a friend of mine, he's a builder. Two of the guys work together. They both call themselves builders. And if you're not a builder, you think, well, they're both builders. One guy, he's actually built his own house, so virtually by himself. And you ask the other guy to quote to do anything, and it's like 200 quid a day. Well, how long will it take? Well, 200 quid a day. Just gobsmacked for somebody who's not in it, how they can tell one builder from another builder, if you know what I mean. They're just the totally different skill levels, but if you ask them both, they're both builders.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's a variance in terms of some jobs, you can get away with the 200 quid a day guy. You know, and you might use him for a number of years for certain things, but you'll soon learn as you go up into the commercial conversions, as you go up into the new build, that guy's going to find himself out of his depth pretty quickly. He's not going to have the right sort of supply chain in place for materials. He's not going to have enough subcontractors for when one subcontractor maybe goes off with COVID because he just uses Dave the plumber. You know, who's his second and his third plumber? Who's his building survey guy that he uses? Who does he use for his warranties? All those sort of things. And, you know, are the finances good enough to cash flow your project when you're about to start spending £1 million with someone? How many different projects have they used that are that size? You know, how many have they delivered? Who the references? Not enough people do that sort of due diligence on the people they're using, whether it's builders, professional teams, and we sort of help support with all that too.
You're actually helping them choose the professionals to actually use in the team.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff we do, some of it's desktop, so we can do stuff remotely. Others is a bit more in depth, so we'll actually go and meet 3 different quantities for them. We'll go and interview 3 different contractors with the QS in most cases. Sometimes we've just had a couple of phone calls with people panicking, saying, I'm about to start this. I think I'm okay, but I'm a bit nervous. And we've actually just looked through all the documents. We've looked at the team that they've appointed, and we said, well, we can't see any gaps. We think you're okay, cracking on. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You know, what payment terms have you agreed? Does that line up with what you've agreed with your finance company? Are you all right? Have you done a cash flow forecast? That sort of thing. So, you know, there's a lot of things that people don't realize they need till it's almost too late. So we're there trying to be the safety net for them.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So from your perspective, obviously, when would be the perfect time for an investor to talk to you? Is it before they start doing anything, or is there a perfect time?
Well, if we can come in at any stage. I reckon the worst possible stage is when things have started to go wrong, obviously. But that's not unusual either, Dave. We've got an example of that this week. A friend of mine's got a friend who's invested in a project, new build project, and nothing's happened for 18 months, and they're now trying to figure out why it's not progressing. So looking at that, trying to unpick that stuff is something we can do. In an ideal scenario, you'd come to us and say, right, we're looking at this new build project. We've never done it before. We've got a builder we like. We've got a QS we like. But let's have a look at it. Let's see what your strategy is. What's your exit? That exit looks safe at the minute. If you come to us on your first new build project, 20 footballers mansions, we'd probably look at you and say, realistically, in current market conditions, we don't think it's viable. We think you should maybe look at doing something different before you start committing hundreds of thousands of pounds to planning for something like that. We've looked at some stuff for people. I'm going to buy this conversion. It's 3 million quid. What do you think? We spend a couple of hours analysing it, looking at the different reports and saying, yeah, I don't think it's worth what you're going to pay for it. We can talk a lot of people out of projects. We're not here just to get people to do projects so we make some fees. We want people that we work with to be successful. So if we can help anyone dodge any bullets or pick up mistakes early on or pick up any inconsistencies in what they're being told, then I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And as you say, mistakes, it's always difficult talking about clients' mistakes. Have you classic mistakes you've had in the property world?
Well, how long have we got? So, there's quite a few big ones that I would say from a property career went from almost a part-time armchair investor to a professional investor developer. I think the two biggest things that stand out for me in terms of what I do differently is one would be having that sort of safety net personally, financially, in terms of personal cash flow, being
Mm.
able to survive without taking any cash out of the property business for a certain amount of time. I think that's really important. So anyone considering leaving, any type of job, it's security, isn't it? Salary, you know you're gonna get paid on time. You know that all your bills are covered. There's a lot of comfort to that. And if you're that sort of person that needs to know that that has to happen, then I wouldn't advocate leaving a job unless you've got 6, 12, 18 months of coverage in your accounts. And if you can do that, then that allows you to make business decisions based on that's the best business decision, not on I need that cash in 3 months. So I'm gonna do this to the refurb, or I'm gonna pick that exit finance because they're saying they can do it cheaper, that sort of thing. When you're getting to the end of a project and needing the cash out to pay the bills isn't a great place to be. So you need to build in contingencies into your projects, but also in your own personal circumstances so that doesn't get tested.
Yeah, actually, cash flow forecasting, not just the project, but yourself and your own living costs and expenses.
There's times where I've paid myself on the Friday and then I had to put it back in on the Tuesday afterwards. So it's not a great place to be.
It's not, but it happens. And as you say with property, generally the rules are it always takes longer than you think and it costs more than you think.
Two golden rules.
Absolutely. But yeah, if people are going in, I think people going into deals where it's so tight. If any single thing went wrong, people trying to flip properties in today's market, it just feels as though you're just taking such a gamble on what you think is going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months or so. And unless there's a backup strategy to it, where it can be rented out if it doesn't sell at the price you want. Yeah. Some of the stories I've heard from new investors, you just look at the figures, you're like, oh, yeah.
You need to have a lot of headroom in these deals at the minute. And I think one thing that COVID taught us was, when your build costs are going up by 20, 30% almost overnight, and then all your build programs are getting longer because you can't have the same amount of people on site anymore, things like that. They were
Mm.
two things that were just examples, but if you compound it, that 20, 30% in build costs and that 20, 30% on build program also all of a sudden screwed every development project that was going ahead because everyone was always like, oh, we only need to spend 20% on costs because that's what the funders asked us for. And we've got a 5% contingency because that's what the funders asked for. Now, 6 months into COVID, they were asking for 15% contingency and they were stress testing at the new prices. So almost overnight, all those deals didn't work anymore, but they were already on site. You can't
Mm.
go back to your refurb, put it back to where it was and walk off.
No, very true.
Yeah, although I do wish that I could have done on a couple of them.
Well, I've had just over the last year or so properties where someone's actually put an offer in, had the offer accepted. 6 months it takes to go through, and then suddenly the finance has completely changed over that 6 months. And yeah, just over quite a short period. And as you say, when you're factoring the COVID stuff, etc., yeah, those things can have such a massive impact on the bottom line of the deal.
Yeah. And even a lot of landlords that have had very successful portfolios are now starting to struggle because they're coming off the fixed terms, and the finance costs have gone up, and all that cash flow and profit that they were used to, and the capital growth are all of a sudden all getting squeezed at the same time, making we're seeing quite a few people coming to us at the minute with portfolios or single units that they want to dispose of because it just doesn't work financially to keep them anymore.
Yeah, with the changes in the finance costs, it's been horrific for some landlords, definitely. So do you do the consultancy with investors? Do you actually get to the point where some investors are like, actually, Tony, you know what you're doing. Can't you just do it all for me?
We have quite a few of those conversations. It depends who it is. Um, Coming back to your other point on mistakes and things I do differently. Property's renowned for joint ventures, people getting involved in partnerships that they've met, not quite in the pub, but almost as bad. So, met Dave at a networking event, or met Steve on a training course, that sort of thing. I've done partnerships with some very good friends. I've done JVs with people that I've met on LinkedIn. Um, it's all great on paper, but I feel like I'm a lot more reluctant to partner with people now until we've done some business together, done projects. I feel like you need to go through a cycle a couple of times with someone before you really know how they react to different things. Everyone's great alignment of values at the beginning, where it's all just a CGI, profit looks great on the spreadsheet and stuff, but people's real sort of actions and the way they feel about things and what drives them does come out when the shit starts hitting the fan. Things start going wrong, and things could be going wrong on three different projects. Things could be going wrong outside of property. There's a lot of different things that people go through, and you need to be um, really, really aligned and know the people really well you're working with if you're going to do that sort of collaboration. Now, it's not something I say I'd never do again, but I've definitely changed my view on it. I'm a bit more reluctant in terms of how quickly I'll accept doing that sort of thing at the moment.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I mean, I've got a little letting agency, and I've got some landlords which, yeah, I wish I hadn't actually got involved with at all. Yeah, phone up. Look, oh, terribly sorry, your boiler's gone. We need a new boiler. And well, I'm not happy about that. No, no, I understand you're not happy, but we need a new boiler for the house. Well, I don't. Right, okay.
Yeah, and that only comes out after you've done the deal and you've all signed up to something, and 3 months later you're arguing about, well, who does that and who decides who's getting paid and who decides who's done that, and who's talking to the solicitor. So getting those roles and responsibilities clear at the beginning of a project, whether it is a JV or whether it's just a project with different team members, that's one of the other things that we strongly advise that people sit down and do. Spend a lot of time doing that at the beginning and actually have plans for, well, what if it doesn't sell?
Yep.
What if person X wants to leave because his marriage has fallen apart or her marriage has fallen apart, or they want to emigrate, or someone gets sick, all those different things that we think, we don't need to worry about that. It's not going to happen. Doing that all at the front end, when you've got the time, when you're not in the middle of a project, when there's not three guys hanging off the scaffolding looking at whether they should put the roof back on or not, they're the times to have those conversations. And that's really something that we really try and drive home to people that we're dealing with.
Yeah, go through all the what ifs beforehand rather than suddenly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because something will go wrong at some point in any property project. If someone comes on and says, well, I've done 10 projects and they've all been fine, I think the line.
I must admit, I think I was talking to someone a while back, and I don't think I've actually ever had a property deal go through just perfectly smooth. Always something comes up. Sometimes you didn't even think you could have problems that come up.
Yeah. So we had a couple of people, unfortunately, pass away either during buying something or even selling something. Happened this year. We were mid transaction, and unfortunately, the guy had a heart attack. It just you just can't. It's people, it's humans, it's life at the end of the day, and that's what we're dealing with. So, the property aspect is one aspect of it, but the people aspect is just as big.
Yep, very true. Yeah, it's a people business at the end of the day, my view. Working with people. So the future, what does the future hold for Tony? So if we were going to be having a chat in 3 years' time, Tony, what have you
Mhm.
been up to the last 3 years? How's things going? What would you like to be able to say to me?
So I've, last couple of years pivoted quite a few times. In the process of starting to grow a portfolio again. A lot of different strategies over the years that I've looked at. So I was big in service accommodation at one point. I'm stepping out of that temporarily. I've got, a number of different supported projects on the go at the minute. I quite like that for the sort of short term hold strategy. As I said, we're helping people with new build at the minute. If a nice new build scheme comes up middle of next year, I'd probably take it on with the right people. If the market conditions were right again, finance is a bit cheaper, that sort of thing. I'm
Mm.
going to continue doing property, Dave. I'm a lot less fussy now about what it actually is in property. I'll be rolling with the punches, no doubt. I'll have done some successful projects. I'll have had some projects that haven't maybe gone as well.
Yep.
But I'm also keen on helping others. So, if 3 or 4 of our consultancy clients have gone on to do, more projects than they used to do, or they professionalize the team, or they're making more profit because we've got the back office working better. And that's also something I'd like to be able to sit here in a couple of years and say we've helped that person do this, this, and this, and we've helped that person, do what they wanted in terms of personal cash flow and that sort of thing.
Yep. I love that. You used the word pivot. Oh, we would have pivoted a few times. I love that. And the fact that your strategy isn't, no, I want to do X number of new builds in the next 5 years. It's, well, that might be a really good market, but it might not be at the moment. So the way you'll actually just totally adapt to what's going on in the market and change strategies, it's just music to my ears because so many people are just focused on the one thing and the one goal.
Mhm.
So yeah, just taking that view. Yeah, don't really know what's going to happen. I'm going to change as the market changes and adapts. You're one of the few people actually who've been very open with that, rather than most people seem to think I've got to have a fixed goal and that's what I've got to do.
For one, I think they need to be known as the HMO guy or the SA person. It's if that's you've got a massive edge in that area. Like I know a service accommodation investor that's a hotel manager by day, so that's a perfect thing for him to start off in property. But he's now gone from sort of doing rent to service accommodation. He's now looking at developments. So that's another step that he's taken. But he started with his core and he's learned it and he's learned his trade and he's got his cash flow coming in and now he's looking at other things in property. That's the thing I love with it. There are so many options. There's so many different things you can do with it.
Mm.
That's what really excites me about it still.
Yep. And so to a completely new investor now, sort of, Tony, I've got some money. I want to invest in property. What would your general advice be at the moment?
So we start off by going through someone's personal situation and aspirations. So it's not how much money do you need? It is, well, okay, you want to invest in property, but why? A lot of people say, well, I want to quit my full-time job. And 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that was me. Because I want to spend more time at home. I don't want to travel as much. I want to supplement my income so I can do work that I enjoy
Mm.
rather than just the most high paid. Met a lot of people through my investment, my education, and stuff like that that worked offshore, didn't want to work away anymore, but couldn't get a job onshore that paid quite as well. So they needed something to top up their income. So we'd sit down, we'd have an initial session with someone, we'd find out what the real drivers were, why they wanted to invest in property. We'd find out what time they wanted to afford it going forward, because all the will in the world, someone comes to me and says, well, I've got an 80-hour a week job and I really fancy doing some service accommodation, I'm going to self-manage them. I just say, you're absolutely bonkers, go and do something else. People that want to go from being a contractor during the day to a developer, that feels like a really logical thing, but there's a lot of skill sets and a lot of people and contacts you need that you can't just flip them overnight and change from being a builder to a developer. You've got an advantage, sure, but if you don't get the other things boxed off, then you can get into some real big trouble. So it's very personal. It's very bespoke. I know that there's a lot of training organisations around in property, and they try and make everything repeatable and scalable because they can have 30 people on a training weekend. They can have 100 people on a webinar. They can put people through the various stages of the funnel and they'll all end up in a mastermind. And I've done some masterminds. I've done some business retreats, some good, some bad. I've learned from all of them. I've met some great people through them. I'm not going to sit here and say they're all rubbish because they're absolutely not, but you need to pick the ones that suit you. But what we do is a more bespoke approach. It's more one-to-one. It's more based on the individual. And, it's part of what we do. It's not all of what we do. So we're consulting on 3 or 4 projects at the minute. We consult with 1 or 2 individuals. That's it. And I also do other consultancy work outside of property. So it's sort of back to procurement, although the procurement I do tends to be property related too. So it's facilities management and looking after estates and things like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, that makes, I love your approach is actually, well, no, it's the why and it's the individual. And I might say that strategy is going to suit that guy, but that strategy is going to suit that guy. It's not no, my advice is you need to go and do this.
It's not this week we're selling SA training and next week we're selling commercial to residential training because that's what everyone's been told is the next big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally bespoke down to the individual, finance, skills, experience, knowledge, and
100%.
they will go with it.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Now that makes total sense. So the big question, what's your forecast on the property market? What's going to happen in the property market over the next few years?
So I spend a lot of time listening to people that are cleverer, wiser, and more experienced than me in property. So, I consume good articles, good podcasts, things like that. And the things that I'm hearing at the minute, Dave? People still need houses. There's still not enough. We're still not building enough. So as a procurement professional, I'm looking at it going, well, supply and demand would stay. Prices aren't going to crash. Rents are still going to be high. Still going to be a lot of demand in the market. I think as consumers, we've got pickier over the years in terms of the standards we accept. You mentioned your landlord before about the guy that fixed the boiler. I see people like that dropping out of the market all the time. I think they'll get forced out. The more professional landlords, people I deal with, even though they're SMEs, I know a lady really well in Chester that runs some really fabulous house shares for professionals. They are amazing. And she's commanding top dollar for her house shares, but she's built communities within those house shares. And it's actually got some really good tenants mixing and collaborating with each other and sort of making friendships. And that's what people are looking for now. Whereas, back in the day when I was in student houses, it was which one was cheaper so we could go out more.
Yeah.
I do think that perceptions have changed. Feel like we're potentially going to end up with a change in government. They're saying some good things in terms of house building and targets because I feel like the Tories have backed off in a big way because they failed there. But there's other areas where obviously, they don't quite understand some of the other areas of the market too. So we will get change, I think. Whether that's positive, it's difficult to say because they might do good things for house building, they might do good for accelerated supply, but they might not be great for landlords in other areas. Really difficult to predict. However, it's getting tougher, as I said before, as a professional property investor developer. Something needs to give soon. Because over the last couple of years, it's been really tough. Lots of people exiting the market that were actually doing a really good job. And they're in danger of just making it so difficult and such a big barrier to entry that people lose interest. And at the end of the day, we still need houses for our people.
It does feel as though the last few years have been really against landlords with the changes in the tax, selective licensing, the talk about EPC changes, now interest rates. Landlords haven't had a good time the last few years, have they?
No, it's been brutal. It has been brutal. And I know some people that have, had really successful businesses. And you've got to be on top of these things all the time. You've got to be constantly managing your performance. You've got to be constantly looking at your rent rolls and saying, well, is that market rent now? Does that need squeezing up a little bit? Until a couple of years ago, I very rarely put my rent up to a tenant if they were paying on time. And if they'd been there a long time, that was almost a reason not to do anything.
Mm.
But if you do that for 4 or 5 years and then you come off a fixed rate and all of a sudden your mortgage doubles, then you've got to have a really bad conversation with your tenant.
Yeah.
So it's almost better practice to gradually nudge it up and make sure no one has a nasty surprise or a nasty conversation at some point. But they're things that over the years I've learned that other people are doing, and that's best practice. But not a lot of people have been. People, all treat these things differently, and every individual that's a landlord, there's so many private landlords, they've got one or two houses. So they're not going to the same events that I'm going to. They're not mixing with the same people. They don't pick up all these tidbits. Very difficult to get that down to everyone. That's what they should be doing. So it's really interesting. I don't see any huge crashes. I do see opportunities because people will dispose of things. People's circumstances change. We've talked a lot about residential today. I really interested in sort of commercial property too, although it's something that I've not done as much of at the moment. But places where I am, so I'm in Stockport at the moment, lots of regeneration going on, lots of redevelopment for resi. Obviously, that's revitalising the high streets. The food and beverage sector is doing really well here. That'll bring in hotels, more industrial popping up left, right, and centre. So there's quite a lot going on commercially at the minute as well. And I feel like because resi, as we said at the beginning, is easier for people to understand because everyone lives in a house. Commercial is almost seen as a step up, but actually, from a lot of reasons, an investor or a developer, it's actually a little bit more straightforward if you know what you're doing.
So more straightforward if you know what you're doing on the development side.
Even yeah, because you don't have quite as much to deal with from a construction complexity point of view. So if you're doing industrial units, for instance, you're literally building a shell
Mm.
and potentially putting some office space within it. It's not quite as complex as building a HMO or creating a new build with all the different regulations and stuff. Your build times and your structures and your complexity can actually shorten quite a lot. So as a developer, industrial is really attractive, but finding land for that and opportunities at the minute is very, very tough. So you need to know what you're doing in terms of what agents you're dealing with, what relationships you've got, and how to source these things.
Absolutely. I must admit, commercial is something I've never got into. I've never had the background in it. And you just think I've made enough mistakes in residential, just more expensive mistakes to make while I still learn commercial.
Yes. Well, I know a few investors that specialize. And again, they've had a rough couple of years. So, finance is massive for them. And, the yields are very, very small in relation to some of the resi stuff, convenience, things like that. 5, 6% yields. Well, when your finance is costing you 8%, then it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, no, I keep going back. I just love your point about pivoting with the market and changing depending on how the market changes, and no one fixed strategy. Yeah, I think it makes so much sense in such a changing world at the moment.
And that's one thing that is probably a cliche soundbite, but that's one thing that's happened regularly over the last couple of years. Next year is going to be a quiet year. Everything's going to calm down. Well, it's not been calm for as long as I've been invested in property, and I don't think it ever will be. But as long as you know what's around the corner, or know to expect that something different might be around the corner, then I think you'll be in a better place.
Expect the unexpected, expect problems.
Yes.
Cool. No, that's been really good talking to you, Tony. Yeah, really, really interesting. And I love your approach, and I love how it's not one size fits all. It's very much dealing with the individual, giving them the advice specifically for them, that different advice to somebody who could be sitting next to them. So yeah,
Absolutely.
fascinating
Absolutely.
to talk to you. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Really enjoyed the chat, Dave. Thanks very much.
Brilliant stuff. All right.
Cheers.
We shall catch you soon. Cheers.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Cheers.